What up, Falcons Nation? Rise Up Nation. It's your boy, Jazzy Jeff. Real talk, no gimmicks. Bring that real Falcons talk to real Falcons fans. And starting this week, I'm going to roll out a new segment called The Final Verdict, where every week I am going to bring up 2 unrestricted free agents that the Falcons have to deal with, and I'm going to decide whether we let them walk, re-sign them, or tag them. And at the end, I will give you my explanation of why I think what I chose is the right decision. Now, these are just my opinions based on stats analysis, experience watching football, playing football, etc. This is not a definitive answer. So if you disagree with my final verdict, that's okay. But I will not tolerate petty high school insults on my channel. I am too grown for that. Grown men don't do that. I don't fight over the internet with random people. So, with that being said, we are going to start with our first free agent that we have to deal with, and he is the most polarizing player on the entire Atlanta Falcons team. That would be Vic Beasley. Now, before we get to the facts of the case, I want to start by saying I have a very up and down relationship with how I feel about Vic Beasley. I started out thinking he was so great, and then I was highly disappointed. Sometimes I let him slide because Dan Quinn moved him out of his natural position and moved him back again, and that ruined his development. I think the coaches changing ruined his development. I think the lack of a pass rush, lack of defensive tackles in run support after Poe left also stunted Vic Beasley's growth. So it is hard to read Vic Beasley. Obviously, he was drafted in 2015, and he only had 4 sacks, but then he jumped out in 2016, 15.5 sacks, and we went to the Super Bowl. And obviously, that was when we had Dontari Poe next to Grady Jarrett. Then he dipped down to 2 straight years of 5 sacks each. And that's when people started really hating him. Now, it seems to me Falcons Nation is on 2 sides of the fence. Either you hate his guts, think he sucks, and you want him off the team, or you think he's really great and he just caught a lot of bad breaks and you still think he's a great player. I tend to believe that just because players aren't all-star, superstar caliber players doesn't mean you have to get rid of them. It does not mean they're trash. There's still solid players in the league who are not perennial all-stars. Now, I thought Vic Beasley's ceiling was perennial all-star, but obviously I don't think that's no longer the case. So let's get to the facts. His contract, he makes $12.8 million out of his entirety of the contract. His contract was backloaded, meaning he got small amounts in the beginning, and his last season, he was paid the $12.8 million. Now, his signing bonus was $8 million, and all his contract was guaranteed. He's 27 years old, and coming up is going to be his 5th year in the season. Now, a lot of people want to move on from Vic Beasley because obviously his production is no longer where it was 2016. But he did finish the year strong last year with 8 sacks. A lot of people say it's because they were fighting for Dan Quinn, the love of Dan Quinn. But I feel like the Jeff Albrick effect made a difference in the defense as a whole. And I also feel like with better production out of defensive tackles, if we draft better, I think Vic Beasley's numbers will go up. But at the same time, he will never reach 2016 numbers. But to keep things in perspective, Von Miller, the great Von Miller, who a lot of Falcons fans want to get, had also 8 sacks on the season this year. And Von Miller makes an average of $17 million a year. In 4 years, Beasley made $12 million in his entirety of the contract. Von Miller's averaging $17 million a year. The top defensive ends / outside linebackers are making 17 and plus a year. Now, a lot of those guys are getting 15 sacks, 14 sacks, 13 sacks, the Shaq Barretts of the world, the Cam Jordans of the world, etc. But a lot of those guys are 30 and up in age. Vic Beasley's only 27, so he's a little younger. Vic Beasley's slightly cheaper, and I think that we don't have to pay him a grand amount of money, and we can do a similar contract as before, where we're not giving him tons of money and maybe put in incentives to increase his sack production. And then afterwards, we draft better defensive players around him, see if his production rises or not. Then you can make your final evaluation on who Vic Beasley is. I understand he's an enigma, and sometimes I really hate him because his motor is not there all the time. He takes plays off. I looked at his production broken down by first quarter, second quarter, third quarter, and fourth quarters of games, and he does a lot in the first quarter. He does a lot in the fourth quarter, which is good because that's the crunch time. But in the second and third quarter, he has significant dips in his production. And I don't know if that's lack of energy, tiredness, fatigue, whatever it is. But when you watch the games, you see he takes plays off. And he sometimes is very lazy on pursuit tackling. And sometimes he's not paying attention. His awareness is down. And he lets guys run around him to the edge. And sometimes he misses edge containment. At the same time, he still is very fast. He fits Dan Quinn's system. He does improve in some areas. His coverage skills has improved. Using him at the outside linebacker position has helped him. And he's getting more comfortable guarding people outside of his original position instead of just being a specialty pass rusher. Yes, he still is a specialized pass rusher, but he has improved in his coverage skills. So, at the end of the day, Falcons Nation, is Vic Beasley worth keeping? Now, keep in mind, you have to factor in Takk McKinley, Grady Jarrett, other guys we have to sign, our cap, etc. Yes, Matt Ryan and Grady freed up cap space. We're getting rid of a couple guys, hopefully, but we don't know what's going to happen with Devontae Freeman. We don't know what's going to happen with other guys. So just based on Vic Beasley alone, are you re-signing him, letting him walk, or tagging him? Let's go to the final verdict.
Oh, look at, I can't believe this. He's just now.
There's your damn signature.
What a cheap, underhanded son of a...
Austin 316, huh?
So as you can see, I decided to let Vic Beasley stay and have the Falcons re-sign him. I believe that he still has potential. He's only 27 years old. He doesn't cost that much money, so we can do a more incentive-laden contract where his numbers are based on how well he does. That way he can stay motivated, so maybe his lack of effort won't happen again. I also believe that we have a more solid defensive structure planned this time, with Jeff Albrecht taking more of a stronger role and Dan Quinn taking more of a backseat in terms of calling the defensive play calls. So I think that will help Vic Beasley. I also see the potential in us drafting better defensive interior linemen, and that will generate more pass rush, which will help Vic Beasley on the edges. So I believe that this is not something that's a complete waste of time. I think that Vic Beasley is still a productive player, and just because he's not one of the best pass rushers in the NFL does not mean he's trash. He's still a solid player, and I still believe in Vic Beasley. So moving on, we are going to get into the second unrestricted free agent that the Falcons have to deal with, and that is Jack Crawford. Welcome back. Now let's get into it. Jack Crawford. He is 31 years old, going on to his 8th season in the NFL. Now, in 2019, he played all 16 games, but he only started 4 games, and he finished with 0.5 sacks. That's right, a half a sack. He had 24 total tackles on the season, but 18 of those were assisted, so he only had 6 solo tackles. Now, in 2018, he played all 16 games, but he started 11 games, and his sack numbers were way higher last year. Also, his snap production went down. Last year, he had on his starts, he had 60+% of the defensive snaps on the field. This year, it dropped down to 50% of snaps when he started in those 4 games. Now, let's get to his contract. His average salary is at $2.9 million, roughly $3 million, with the signing bonus guaranteed. Now, to compare that to other players in the league, I took a list of guys who are making an average salary between $2 to $3 million a year in salary, and you tell me if these guys are better than Jack Crawford. Sheldon Rankins, Jeffrey Simmons, Michael Pierce, Shaq Lawson, Pierre Paul, Tack McKinley. Jack Crawford right now makes more than Tack McKinley, and he barely plays. Now, why is that? Why did his production drop? Why did his snaps drop? Obviously, the addition of Adrian Claiborne back in the fold, John Kaminsky back in the fold, Deidre Sanat, Tyler Davidson, these types of guys take away snaps from Jack Crawford, and it's just the nature of the game. So the question, Falcons Nation, at his average salary of 2.9, is he worth keeping on this team? So, are we going to re-sign him, let him walk, or tag him? Let's go to the final verdict. Welcome back. As you can see, it wasn't that hard for me to make this decision. I let Jack Crawford walk due to his age, his lack of production, his drops and snaps, the fact that we have Kaminsky, Tyler Davidson, Sanat, a whole bunch of younger guys that are now on our team who can fill in that spot, and Adrian Claiborne still there. I also think that this draft is going to be draft heavy, so there's a lot of guys that we can replace for him, and spending $2 to $3 million a year is not worth the guy who barely plays, and we have bigger fish to fry, money to spend in other positions, players to draft in other spots, and I think they can be easily replaced. They can easily replace the role of Jack Crawford. So it was good while it lasted. He was a nice rotational piece, but moving forward, we got to think bigger and better and more quality. So I'm sorry, Jack Crawford. When you see Stewie in my video, that means it's time to walk. Anyways, Falcons Nation, thank you for joining this segment of The Final Verdict. I hope you tune in next time as I look at 2 other unrestricted free agents that the Falcons need to deal with this offseason. If you are new to my channel, welcome. Please hit that subscribe button for future content. Like, share, comment, and as always, Falcons Nation, we rise up. Peace.